Hi, Laura K. Buzz here, and I've got some exciting news for everyone. On February 16th, 2023, Who Hunts the Whale releases. It's a satirical novel that I wrote with my wife Jane about the AAA video game development industry and someone who's just managed to get their dream job working for a AAA game development studio in the United States, only to start realising that the people at the top of the company don't necessarily have the workers' best interests in mind. We've put a lot of ourselves into this novel, we've put our heart and soul into it, and we're absolutely so proud of this book. It is funny, it is sweet, it is serious. It is a book that satirises the games industry, but also takes a solid look at what is really happening in the games industry today, and tries to look at what can be done to improve an industry that is terrible to the people creating the games you love. It's called Who Hunts the Whale. It's out on February 16th. I really hope you check it out. Originally released as a manga in the early to mid-2000s, and adapted into a 37-episode anime series a few years later, Death Note tells the story of Light Yagami, a high school student who finds himself in possession of a supernatural notebook that allows him to kill any person on Earth, granted he's seen their face and knows their full name. While the character of Light initially starts using the notebook to kill for reasons that he's able to personally justify, killing dangerous individuals who either pose an imminent threat to loss of innocent life, or who appear to have evaded the criminal justice system and may risk danger if left in society, the story quickly pivots to one about the corrupting influence of power, and how allowing one teenager to determine who should be permitted to live or die without oversight or accountability can quickly spiral into a perception of godhood, and the belief that said power elevates one above the rules that other people are expected to follow. While the core of the original Death Note is a story about a teenager willing to self-justify killing innocents to protect himself, because he feels that stopping his murder spree will do the world more harm than good, spiraling into increasingly ludicrous justifications for self-serving fascist criminality, certain adaptations of the story in the years since have tried to give Light's origin story a more modern left-wing justification. In more than one modern reimagining, the protagonist of Death Note is made explicitly anti-capitalist, more emotionally concerned with saving the world than punishing the wicked. I know those two things seem like they would be the same, but we're going to get into it. They're really very distinct and different. Now, I want to be clear up front, this is certainly not the case for every Death Note adaptation. I'm not going to be digging into any of the live-action English adaptations of the series, for example, as those tend to lean more into the angle of Light Yagami as an emo anti-hero. No, today I'm going to be talking about Death Note the Musical, and the 2022 Simpsons parody story, Death Tone. So, to set the scene, let's start by revisiting the opening episodes of the Death Note anime, and reminding ourselves of Light's characterization, motivations, and actions in the early sections of the story. Where the more modern reimaginings of Death Note that we're going to be discussing later use a specific moral philosophy to justify to the viewer that Light is morally correct and trustworthy enough to use the Death Note, at least with regards to his initial motives, the original anime is much more focused on the idea that Light as an individual should be trusted with the power over life and death, without really telling us as the viewer what he believes, beyond the surface level belief that violence is bad when conducted against innocent people. Very little, if any, effort is made to tell the viewer what kind of person Light Yagami is, and, perhaps more importantly, what kinds of people in the world he does, or does not, consider as being morally acceptable. The opening episode of the Death Note anime, when characterizing Light's initial motivation for using the Death Note, focuses almost exclusively on death and other violent crime, juxtaposed deliberately with religious imagery, meant to evoke visions of a god acting to enact divine retribution upon the wicked. In amongst news reports of violent assaults, which our main character is implied to be bombarded by during everyday life, we see a classroom scene where a teacher reads out a religiously charged quote, only to have Light Yagami respond with an equally religiously charged response, translated into English from a textbook. Listen for the voice of God, then follow it, and know that, in time, you will find your salvation. Follow the teachings of God and receive his blessings. And so it shall be, the seas will again become bountiful, and the raging storms shall subside. Those initial quotes, juxtaposed by the surrounding news reports, serve to set up much of Light's early motivation in the source material. The world is full of violent individuals, and law enforcement can't act quickly enough in the moment to protect the innocent. If you, like Yagami, see an opportunity to follow the will of a god, something more powerful than the police, you'll be forgiven for any immoral behaviour you have to enact along your way. Your world will improve and you will lessen the overall amount of violence and pain in the world by accepting any gifts offered to you by the divine. When we initially hear Light's inner monologue in the anime dub, pondering the state of the world, it's also important to note that, right from the start, Light is focused not on the world containing bad people of specific backgrounds, doing specific harms. When he first thinks about the state of the world, prior to acquiring the Death Note itself, he thinks to himself, this world is rotten. This generalized belief structure is repeated throughout the first episode. The idea that evil is a disease, and he should be the one to decide who is too evil to be allowed a chance of redemption. Right from the start, Light is not focused on any individual facet of the world being rotten, or any specific category of evil deed needing to be undone. The world in general is irredeemable, with no specific political leaning displayed beyond violence being a net evil to the world. In terms of initially established background, Light is presented as an incredibly academically gifted and generally well-behaved student, living with a father employed by the police. Despite his personal frustration at the perceived failings of the criminal justice system, he respects police as individuals, and personally seems to believe that their only flaw is that bureaucracy prevents them from doing the job the way that they should, killing criminals without providing them with an opportunity for response or defense. He's pro-cop, and honestly wishes they had more power to punish those that they suspect of crime without the pesky courts getting in the way. This is, honestly, the only real justification that we get in the early episodes of Death Note that is meant to suggest to the viewer that Light Yagami is in any way responsible enough to be trusted with the power over life and death. He's smart, he's well behaved, and he's from a family who believe in upholding the law, and specifically, the letter of the law. Light's first murder is presented as an act of justified protection of innocent life. By killing a gunman holding a class of young children hostage, he's shown to use the Death Note to punish an individual violent criminal in the middle of committing a violent crime, to prevent harm to innocent bystanders. There is no grander plan beyond, in the moment, taking the right to end that life into his own hands. Similarly, the second kill in the series sees Light kill a biker in the process of attempting to sexually assault a young woman outside of a convenience store. Again, it's an individual act to stop a crime in progress, without being backed by any underlying political belief about the wider world. The first episode goes to great lengths after this to remind us of Light's intellect, lingering on his mother's response to his positive school report card, to try and emphasise that Light is smart enough to be trusted with this power over life and death. By the end of the first episode, Light is already shown to have grown to find joy in using the Death Note to kill, taking countless lives with the nebulous aim of getting rid of all the criminals. He makes no differentiation here as to whether petty theft by someone with a starving child at home is as deserving of death in his world as a serial killer. He wants a world without crime, and that's his full aim as initially presented at its most charitably seen. Even at its most altruistically presented, Light's explicit yet ill-defined mission is to eliminate the world of non-specific vermin. He has no explicit political leaning we can glean, no sense of what he believes about groups who might be legally wrong but morally right. The original is a story of one individual deciding crime itself is his broadly defined enemy. It's by comparison to this that I find both the 2014 Death Note musical and 2022's Simpsons Death Tone parody so comparatively interesting in their desire to attempt to give the main character a more politically defined set of beliefs prior to receiving the notebook, seemingly as a method of trying to better justify the actions that follow as defensible by viewers who may share those specific political beliefs. With Death Note the musical, this anti-capitalist messaging largely comes in the form of an opening song, titled Where is the Justice?, which, conveniently for us, has an official English translation and adaptation. A song, which is framed as a university lecture in which legal principles are being debated between students and their lecturer, does present Light as still being a fan of the police generally and the prison industrial complex, but with a specific focus on wishing that the law was applied equally to corporations, politicians, and billionaires, rather than allowing those groups to be above the law due to their positions of wealth and power. Light doesn't believe that the current system of policing is fundamentally irredeemable, but he does talk of inaction by the criminal justice system in defense of individual innocent people, and the fact that that system is protecting first and foremost wealth, policing different groups unequally. In particular, Light focuses on the argument that, while on paper everyone is treated equally under law, those with money are more able to afford expensive lawyers who are able to help the rich and famous get away with crimes that those without money would be more harshly punished for.
Laws are made for everyone, we're treated all the same, till the lawyer's tricks can fix the blame. What about the victims waiting for some justice? How can we turn away and say that's just the way things are? What about the families hiding in their houses? All of them afraid to walk the streets at night with all their doors locked tight. Tell me, where is the justice, if there's any justice? Overwrought pronouncements won't improve the paradigm, till lawyers cutting deals becomes a crime. Let the corporations make the regulations and hold no one accountable when everything goes wrong. Let the rich and famous get away with murder. Every time a high-priced mouthpiece starts to talk, his client gets to walk. Tell me, where is the justice, if there's any justice?
Politicians make their speeches all day long, while judges pushing pencils mostly get it wrong.
It set up loopholes for the laws to fall between. Let some good old-fashioned payback grease the wheels of the machine.
Whether or not you agree with the stance presented, it's undeniable that this interpretation of Light Yagami has a much more clearly defined set of starting beliefs. At least on paper, he believes at the offset that innocent people are overly punished by the legal system, and that, while legally innocent, celebrities, politicians, and corporations are often immoral and spared punishment under the law by protection afforded by capital. The story of Death Note the musical doesn't hugely differ from the original source material from this point forward, with this setup not having a huge impact on the progressing narrative, but serves as a more politically aligned justification for Light starting the story as a moral person, in order to make those who agree with his starting political beliefs more strongly feel that the story is showing the descent into corruption of someone who started with generally moral aims, rather than the anime adaptation of Light, who is talking about all criminals indiscriminately as vermin, basically from moment one. While Light still goes on to kill individual violent criminals, he is at least implied to have specific beliefs behind that choice, giving the viewer a sense that he would likely, for example, kill a greedy energy CEO before he would kill a home renter behind on their electricity bill. It's not a huge narrative shift, but one that does have impacts felt throughout the tone of the story. Now, the Simpsons Death Tone parody is remarkably similar in its take on the source material, attempting a similar method of making Light, here replaced by Lisa Simpson, come across as motivated by something larger than herself and not simply the punishment of specific violent individuals. Focused on a set of moral principles that feel well suited to Lisa Simpson as our parody protagonist, the story's opening monologue shows a world not in the grip of violent crime on an individual scale, but one on the brink of collapse on a global, explicitly corporate scale. Factory farming, disposable cars designed for obsolescence, animal exploitation, gender reveal party napalm explosions, and corporate disregard for global warming are presented as imminent and present threats. While Lisa's first murder does mirror that of Light in the anime, the killing of a criminal holding an innocent life hostage, in this case a famous internet cat who likes to jump into boxes, from here forward her story's focus, and the focus of her killings, diverts. Rather than her father being a police officer, he's an employee of Mr. Burns, who here operates a cartoonishly evil business, deliberately and knowingly melting the polar ice caps for personal gain. He's presented as knowing the consequences that it will lead to huge amounts of the world being flooded, to the point of being inhospitable, and he shows no remorse. For the most part of this adaptation, Lisa is only shown as killing corporate CEOs in order to limit the global scale of harm that they're doing to the planet, by perpetuating and worsening global warming. She's still killing people she sees as criminals, but she's also explicitly killing capitalist figureheads who've not technically broken any laws, but she feels have failed to be punished or stopped from causing future harm by the criminal justice system. In addition, by virtue of the parody's short runtime, the story ends with Lisa not ultimately killing to protect herself from consequences, and ending her murder spree when her political aims are completed. I've sat on this video for quite a long time, in no small part due to struggling to draw meaningful conclusions from the existence of these two thematically similar parodies. In the end, I think for me, the most sound explanation comes not from these Death Note adaptations themselves, but rather how they act as the tonal inverse to things like the recent adult-oriented reimagining of Scooby-Doo, titled Velma. I'm not going to go into great depth here on Velma as a series, but I think these Death Note adaptations serve a similar, if opposite, purpose. Both are taking a property that has been previously wildly successful, but has somewhat fallen out of popular discussion in recent years, and attempted to spin the formula to appeal more to a slightly tweaked audience. In the case of Velma, it's an edgier crowd, and here, it's a crowd who might find it easier to empathise with a magical murderous teenager if they share some of their starting political views and beliefs. Now, I do still enjoy the original source material of Death Note, but I recognise the flaws it has. It's a story that is wonderfully told in its dramatic pacing and character performances, even if it is fundamentally at times an uncritical examination of a main character with very loosely defined starting beliefs. But if these recent Death Note adaptations have taught me one thing, and only one thing, it is that even the most flawed piece of media can be improved with the addition of a catchy song about being frustrated at the power that wealth and privilege provide.
Thank you so much to this month's Patreon backers who help make this show possible. You can support the show and everything I do at patreon.com/LauraKBuzz.